And we're going to talk about the first question is there are people here that they want to play games with controllers. Final Fantasy XIV, to get to controller support, you simply open it up, you go to character configuration, and you toggle it. It doesn't matter what platform you're on. If you're on console, it may start here, I think, and then you can literally toggle to keyboard and mouse. And if you're on PC, you can go toggle over to gamepad mode. It's very, very easy, and the cross hotbar system is incredible. It is incredible. Okay? So, from there, we have World of Warcraft. Does it have controller support? Now, in Shadowlands, they added controller support, but it feels like the way it was added, that it's kind of like they added a dev version behind the scenes, and that if you knew the right console commands, the right up, up, down, down, A, B, select, select, start, you would have the ability to get to it. And so Brian has videos over on how to get kind of controller set up in that. And when he tried it going into Shadowlands, that was there. But as chat noted, not all of us want to have like a master's degree in console command hacking, luau language shenanigans, whatever, to get it to do that. So first of all, what are the big things that you end up needing add-ons for? Well, the first thing is that actually, like, I really like how clean I can get my UI to look. And if you're doing things in controller, and even if you do use a third-party program to do keypad, this doesn't look like a controller layout. And so I want to talk about the new edit mode. Edit mode here has all sorts of different checkboxes to determine what's available. They kind of feed you a little tutorial there, and there is a grid, and that grid can be resized to whatever size you want so that you can be very precise. And then you can decide whether or not things are snapping to that grid or you're just using the grid to help you. It snaps at the end of the movement. So if I move it and it's in, so let's move to like a bigger grid. It moves there and then it will kind of snap it. So when you get close, it kind of moves at the end of the movement when you release. Okay. So we have our thing here, our placement here, and they have a couple of basic layouts. They have the classic layout, and they have the modern layout. It is not quite perfect, but let's go ahead and create like a weird one. So I've got a couple of weird ones built here. And so this is one that you would never ever want. So imagine that you can get it to be laid out in something that makes sense with your gamepad. And this is your weird layout. And you're like, oh my God, it's perfect, Chris. It's perfect. Okay. Well, one of the other problems is that in World of Warcraft on a single character, we have different specializations. And so right now, I am on a warrior and I am in arms, but imagine that this is my DPS spec. Imagine if I want to go over and tank. Well, I would simply activate this and it would switch me over. Okay. So I switch over and what did it do? It reverted my UI because I may not want to tank with the same UI that I DPS. And so I can go in and I can go to test number 1. Right? So we move some things around. So now my portrait is basically right on my shoulder pad instead of being out here. And if I go back to my talents and specs, I can go back to arms. And right here, it goes right back to this lovely, beautiful UI that we came up with before, that I made intentionally very visually noticeable so that we could prove the point. Please don't ever have your UI actually look like this. So you can actually go in and you can preset up. What would it do if I targeted something? What would it do with my raid frames? And so on. So if I go back to modern and I turn on my raid frames, one of the things that people don't like about raid frames is actually that they don't like their size. So I'm going to be running maybe a 25-man raid, and I can make them wider. I can make them deeper. I can separate them. Are they in groups horizontal? Are they in groups vertical? We have separate groups. We have combined groups. Do you want everybody combined? I prefer everybody combined. I prefer to think of them vertically, and I would like it sorted by role. That's no problem. I can also separate how big the column sizes are. I like the nice square. And so that can all be there. And then one of the things that I've used add-ons for the past is I want my party frames to look like my raid frames. I wish there was a checkbox here to say, use the same scaling and spacing choices of my raid frames or something like that to have those link. But there isn't. But you could go ahead and get it set up the exact same way. and I would still like it to be sorted by role. I would still like it to be, you know, maybe 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, or something like that. So you could kind of, you could adjust it, and you can have it have a border versus not. You can have it be horizontal versus not. So there is quite a bit there, and you can do that with kind of each bar. Now, a lot of these bars, you can have kind of, my understanding is that some of these bars you can have appear in combat versus not. The problem is that it's not all options. So I do think there's still some things here that aren't quite perfect, but it is a massive, massive leap forward. And so if I leave and I want to save this, I can save it. It can be a character-specific layout. And if you see a layout that you really enjoy from somebody else, maybe a friend, you're watching a friend play, and you're like, man, I really love your layout. What you can do is you can go in here and they can say, you know what, I'm going to share it, and it'll give you a copy to clipboard, and it gives you a big, ridiculous text chain. And so I can come in here and say, what's test 2? This awfulness. And I can say share, copy to clipboard, and I can go to import, and I can paste that. And here is all the awfulness that makes that. And so this makes this shareable. So when people are like, oh, I really want it to mimic this, the advantage of this is that this is now something that's cloud saved. So if you ever take a break from the game, then when you come back, it'll be exactly like you left it, as opposed to relying on add-ons. That's the one part you kind of end up having to reconfigure a little bit, depending on how those add-ons have updated and changed. And so this truly kind of makes something protected. And I really enjoy that. So I think this is a lot cleaner. I think it's going to get rid of some of the add-ons that I use, but not all of them. Now, from there, one of the things that people who are playing Final Fantasy XIV as their main game and would like to try World of Warcraft is they wonder, okay, so it has some controller support, but there are a lot of things in Final Fantasy that I can go in and I can choose a ton of these settings. There's accessibility settings, there's targeting settings, there's all these different settings that World of Warcraft has typically only been possible to do with their base UI plus a set of add-ons. And so now we can hop over to World of Warcraft and we can go into options and look at this. We have a whole new options menu. And for anybody that's used to the current options menu, they added a search bar, so you don't need to learn this one. If you know what the name of the setting is you're looking for, you can just search for it. So we have a bunch of new controls. We can choose things like sticky targeting. We can go ahead and move into, there is what's called a action targeting. There it is. See, I didn't know where it was put. It's under combat. And so we can go into action targeting, and this will automatically target the closest thing that you're looking at, in addition to the standard targeting system. And so this would allow controller players to have a little bit easier targeting things. One of the other things that keyboard players have complained about is that there isn't a default interact key. And here is your default interact key that you can bind to 2 different things. And you can enable that. You can enable interacting with NPCs and objects using a key press, and I'd prefer it to be numpad 0. Sure, that was not the default, that's just what I want. And so I can come over here to this Halloween event. And did I enable targeting? Action targeting? Enable action targeting. And I should be able to, there it is. I can interact with that candy bucket without clicking. My mouse didn't move, I can interact with that. And to complete it, I should be able to just complete, I don't know how to complete the quest. So, there should be ways to do that. So they're getting there. But you can see, like, it's still a little clumsy. It's still a little bit clumsy. And some of this came at the cost of protecting legacy, as opposed to in Final Fantasy XIV, they did a really good job of you can go back and enable legacy movement if that's what you prefer. So there are some things where, like, when they change something, sometimes it goes away, but a lot of times they protect it because Final Fantasy is okay with their menu being 2 different menus, each menu with a left side set of main menus. Each of those has their own tabs. Those tabs you get to scroll down. Some have drop downs and sub boxes and sliders, and so they're okay with having a lot more settings. The cost of that is that their setting system does not have a search bar, and so sometimes you get a setting set just the way you like it, and then you don't know how to tell a friend how you did it because you did it a year ago, and like, this is all chaos. This is all chaos. I love that I can have a unique UI to every single spec on every single class, as opposed to Final Fantasy XIV. I am stuck with these 4 layouts, and so I have to decide that I want all DPS, all tanks, all healers, or something like that, and then maybe I have a crafter bar, and like, I would love for this to be 10 of them, but it's just not. And so I think it's gotten a lot better. There's also the ability now for you to have talking... where's the head? I don't know. There's some changes here where, like, when I talk to people, I don't remember what every setting's called, but there's some changes here where it just feels like it's starting to integrate various things, like what add-ons have done, where you're filtering down the number of things or you're filtering up the number of things. Chat bubbles is something that has been a desired add-on in the Final Fantasy XIV community. In here, it defaults to all, but you could go ahead and change it. And so they're getting better. I would love for this to have even more filters. And so here you can say, I don't want party chat to have chat bubbles, but I do want... So it's getting a lot better. I still think it would be very hard to raid heal like this, but when we talk about things like accessibility, we can see the move pad, we can get rid of the photosensitivity issues, we can add subtitles to things, we can make quest text easier to read, we can adjust the size of character names to be ridiculously large as it needs to be. We can get rid of motion sickness, which there is a particular mount that has advantages to using that mount that does cause some people motion sickness, and we can kind of change the way that functions. We can decide whether or not the camera shakes. So we can even change my cursor to be very, very, very large. And so they've gotten a lot better. The colorblind modes are unfortunately limited to just the 3 primary types of colorblindness and how strong you want that colorblindness to be. But they don't allow that to be something that you can go in and filter further. So I'd love to see this go even further still, but it's a great start. You've got text-to-speech. And so it's gotten a lot better. One of the things I love is this was not here before. I can go ahead and I run with 4 monitors, and I can go ahead and say, go to my primary monitor or each of those, and it works beautifully. It's something I'd love to see Guild Wars specifically do. Final Fantasy says it has kind of stuff like this, but it never quite works. When I go to my system configuration on the display settings, it has my 4 displays, but then, like, it requires a reboot. And so I find that really frustrating. I understand that's something that's not affecting every player, but like this whole thing is about making the gameplay experience unique to you. And so that is a problem that is unique to people that are affected by having, you know, more than one monitor, that it does reasonably well. Guild Wars does incredibly poorly. So overall, I think these are just leaps forward. I don't think that any of these things that I've talked about here are now best in class. I think a lot of times they are playing catch up with things that games have had 10 years past. But that doesn't mean it's not a good reason to try the game out now. It doesn't mean it's not something to be thanked or be thankful for. It's not like, well, they should have done it 10 years ago, so they don't deserve points for doing it now, so they should have just, never done it? Like, I think that's a terrible argument. They did do it. It does improve the game now. It would be nice if it had been done sooner, but the best time to do something was previously. The second best time is now. So, like, that's great. It's better. It's better. And I do think that's important. So the menus have gotten a lot better. There is no, like, the controller toggle. Like, I think there's people that are playing with controller now, and I don't really know how to do that. Like, it's not as obvious. And so I'm seeing people do it. But as a non-controller player, it's not something that, like, affects me, as opposed to here, like, it was really easy to find that. I don't have to be somebody that knows how to do this to do it. It just handles it, right? I can just toggle and then toggle, like, it just handles it. And so if I want to get my controller out, which I always keep nearby, I can. And I do play some games with controllers, and it's really nice that I have that option to decide if this is one of those games. So I don't know that this is, like, the be-all, end-all, but I do think that in Shadowlands, a lot of the accessibility complaints, a lot of the controller complaints were something they made a small effort towards, and then came out with public statements that sounded like they were trying to be wildly accommodating of everybody, and this is the next small step in that journey. So this might just mean, you know what? Maybe Dragonflight isn't the time if these are the reasons you're playing or not playing a game, but maybe that time is in the future. Maybe 11.0 is that time, or 12.0, and that this game is something to keep an eye on. They're not just saying, well, we didn't solve it 10 years ago, so we never can. They're saying, you know what? This has become an industry standard, and we are behind the ball. And we don't need to be pioneers in everything. Sometimes we just need to catch what everybody else is already doing. Look at all these extra action bars I can have. Thank you. It's so great. It's so great. Absolutely wonderful. They've done such a great job doing this.